Sabrosura pa' ti que
Hello, everyone. This is Pam, the Café con Pam, the bilingual podcast that features Latine and people of the global majority who break barriers, change lives, and make the world a better place. Today, we have a conversation with Criss Madrigal. Criss is a first-generation Mexican-American, youngest daughter of immigrant parents, and founder of the Latina Growth brand. She's a 20-year Fortune 500 leader turned mindset and growth coach, international best-selling author, speaker, and host of the Latina Growth Journey podcast. Her mission is to help elevate the collective consciousness of 1 million Latinos and women across the globe by 2029 through coaching, publishing, and podcasting. As a coach, she helps highly successful women live a balanced dream life without overwhelm, guilt, or compromising their values by cracking the reinvention code, a method to achieve a breakthrough transformation with irreversible results. In publishing, she helps women become best-selling authors by sharing their stories while leaving a legacy behind. In her podcast, she teaches you to let go of limiting beliefs and become limitless by reprogramming your mind. And listeners, this conversation with Criss, I actually was on her podcast, and you'll get to hear a little bit of my story on her show. And my conversation with Criss explored a lot of intricacies in her life and how various choices, or actually how she had to make choices as life presented itself. We cover things from becoming a mother, from taking the role of being a mom and taking care of your children, being a corporate person, being someone who wears the hats in the corporate world and then choosing to leave to launch her business. And something that I actually have reflected is the amount of coaches that I have interviewed. And I think what I love about this, given that I am a coach myself, is how everyone brings in their lived experience into their coaching practice. And so I think it's really powerful. And that's why I love that there's many more coaches coming into the business world and creating programs and launching their businesses, because you will find the coach for you. Y como decimos en español, siempre hay un roto para un descosido. Entonces, I really enjoyed Criss's story. I think you'll enjoy it as well. Sin más, aquí está mi conversación con Criss Madrigal.
Sabrosura pa' ti que
Criss, welcome to Café con Pam.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, lovely having you. So the first question that we always start with is, what is your heritage?
I am first generation Mexican American, born here in California, from parents from Jalisco.
And always been in California, or did you move?
No, my entire childhood, we spent half of the year in the U.S., half in the year in Mexico. So every December, my parents would pack it up and we would spend 6 months in Mexico, and then we'd come back in May, June when the school year ended, and we'd spend the first semester here.
Wow.
Yeah, my dad's job was one of those that slowed down in the winter,
Mm-hmm.
and they would give them, time off. We would go to Mexico, start the school year over there in December or January, and then he would always come back a few months after. But my mom waited for us to end the school year, and then we'd come back. It was beautiful.
How many of you?
3.
Okay, and you're the youngest.
I am the youngest.
So, and you always, since elementary school, you started doing this?
First grade until 8th grade, because I did have a desire. Yeah, I had a desire to go to college. And at that time in Mexico, the education system just was not structured in a way that made it accessible to all. It was more of who you know and do you have the financial means? And so at that time, it wasn't accessible. And I had that desire. So starting high school, that's when we stayed here.
And was it because of you and your whole family stayed after that? Or was that kind of like a split decision?
Our entire family stayed. I'm the youngest. My sister, she was spending part of the school year over there still. She
Okay.
came and just finished her last semester of high school here. So I had the opportunity to just, from freshman year on, let's do it.
And how was it for you throughout those years where you would go back and forth to have friendships and keep in touch with people? I mean, it was different times where, cell phones didn't exist where you could like FaceTime your friends, right? So how was
Right.
that?
Oh, it was beautiful. Back then, obviously, it was letters. So yes, it was almost like little like pen pals, right? We did write letters to each other, but it was almost this known thing. So my friends in Mexico knew that come December, we were going to arrive, and we got to spend time there with them. And it was quite a different dynamic, I'll tell you, Bum, because I always felt very connected to my friends in Mexico. Very different than my friends here.
Mm-hmm.
Mind you, at that time, I lived in a town that was about 1,800 people. The school that I went to was tiny, and the only Hispanics were my own cousins. And
Wow.
so there wasn't that diversity here to connect. And so being in Mexico just felt beautiful. I felt connected. I felt seen. And it
Mm.
was very different to see my parents' perspective as well, or just how
Mm-hmm.
they behaved in the sense of here in the US, we weren't allowed to go over to our friend's house. We weren't allowed to have sleepovers. We weren't allowed to do any of those things.
Yeah.
But in Mexico, it's like there was this different level of confidence for them. So we were free to go visit our friends. We were free to just roam around town. It was a small town, not a big city. So it definitely felt different. And it's probably some of my best childhood memories to have spent time in Mexico.
Totally. And I mean, I think I resonate with that because I also did a lot of back and forth. And I think the sense of belonging that exists already there, there's no need to fit in. There's no need to, in a way, fight for your place. You already have one. And there's no need to like establish yourself and, versus here, it's very much because there's so many different types of people and there's so many variables and layers to different things. The belonging piece perhaps takes a little bit longer.
Mhm.
Insert lack of diversity, insert, all of that for sure.
Yes,
So you are a parent now.
I
Did you ever
am.
think about doing this for your kids?
Funny you asked. My entire life, I said I was going to do that. And my husband is also from Jalisco. He was born there, raised here, but we talked early on of both of us at one point saying if we had children, we were going to take them to explore and live and feel that culture. But to me, the state of the country in terms of me feeling safe and secure has changed over the years. And it's not something that I desire anymore.
Yeah,
It's sad, but I don't.
for sure. But you've been, I'm sure. You've taken them.
Yes, I've taken them. We actually my children went for the first time last September, actually, my entire family,
Wow.
a las fiestas del pueblo. We're from a town called Yahualica, and they loved it. They had been before, but they were very young. And traveling with three kids when they were younger was a lot of work.
For sure. For sure. For sure.
Yes.
So now they're older and they were able to enjoy it and remember.
My son is going to be 15 here in a week, and my daughter's just turned 13. I've got twins. And so, yeah, they take care of themselves now. So it's
Yes.
just a matter of giving them a little push to get out the door. But very different when I first took in, my daughters were 6 months and my son was,
Oh
I,
my
I
gosh,
had them all
little.
under, yeah, I had them all under the age of 2. So I had 3 kids under the age of 2. It was very difficult to want to just pick up and go anywhere. It was a lot of work.
Totally. So back to your story, you decide you want to go to college, you stay here after middle school, and then you go to college. What happens?
So I ended up moving to San Jose, California. Very diverse place, very beautiful.
Very different.
Very different than the small town I'm in. But it was a sense of connection again. So what I didn't have in the small town I lived in, I found in this city that was very diverse, that everywhere I looked, there's people that looked like me, that spoke like me, and it was an instant connection. It was beautiful. I loved it.
It makes a difference to have diversity, no?
Oh, absolutely.
So you start in corporate and your life changes after. So how do you decide that you're going to go into this corporate path? Was that something always in your mind? Is it something that your parents instilled? How did that happen?
Yeah, it's interesting. I always enjoyed school for some reason. So I went to San Jose because they had a good business school, and I was going to go into business. That was it. International business is what I majored in. So I got a bachelor's in international business. I got a second one in Spanish, and I got my master's in communication studies. And I was going to do business internationally. But then I chickened out of doing the international thing because I'm so close to my family and I just couldn't see myself traveling or doing any of that. But corporate was where my mind was set. And I landed a corporate job. I ended up in human resources, which is actually funny how I ended there because earlier on, I went to the career center because they're going to help you figure out
Right.
what career you fit in. And they told me human resources is your path. When they told me that, my sister also worked at the career center. I said, she doesn't know what she's talking about. And I never went back because she was lying. What does she know? And interesting enough, years later, that's where I ended up. And I worked in the same corporation for 19 years in human resources.
In human resources.
Before I transitioned out of corporate. So they knew what they were saying.
There's some truth to that. Did you go back and tell that person, like, look, your predictions came out true?
I did not. No.
That would have been funny.
It would have been good, but yes. And in my mind, I thought, well, what would have happened if I would have continued going to recessions? What else would I have learned about myself? But no. And it's interesting, right? Because we do that in life so often.
Yeah.
Where something is presented to us and we're like, no, that's not what I, want. But maybe that's what's inside of you.
Totally.
You're just not listening to it.
100%. What was when this person said your path is on human resources? What came to your mind that you were like, no, that's not it?
Well, I do recall her saying some of the traits, like compassionate and able to lead others. And I don't think in that moment I was able to see that within me.
Nice.
So looking back, I mean, that's exactly what I do, right? That's, whether it's in human resources or now as a coach and as a leader and all these things, that's what it was. But it's interesting how we don't see certain things within us. And even though people may be pointing them out to you, I guess it's a part of just believing.
When did you start believing?
Oh my goodness. That's a good question. If I'm totally honest with you, I'm going to say it's in the recent 5 to 8 years. And I say that because even while being in human resources, being successful, leading people, and people saying those things to me, I still didn't believe it. I didn't see it within me. So it was more of an exploration of figuring out who I was internally that said, you know what, I am. And the evidence is all around me. And people have been telling me I just need to step into that version of Criss and allow it to be. And once I did, it's almost like all my other passions just were able to flourish from there.
I love that. So, how was for Criss back then hopping into the corporate role and then kind of like, in a way, climbing the ladder or, like getting into it? And did you, like, on paper, you were successful, but did you still not believe it?
I mean, there were moments when I did. I guess when you get the recognition, when you get the awards, I believed it. But in the corporation I was at, it was difficult to climb the corporate ladder. Their headquarters is in Tennessee. And while there were plenty of opportunities for me and they would reach out to me to be able to put in for these positions, once again, I was too attached to home.
Oh, they wanted you to move.
Correct.
Oof.
It was one of those where I had to move and I couldn't. I just thought this is where I'm at. And, as I began to just grow my family, then it wasn't an option for me. I guess it could have always been, it was always an option, but it was an option I didn't want to explore because I needed my family's support as I raised my children.
Do you think that's a very Latino thing that we just kind of have to stick together?
It's very possible as I speak to, we're changing. Obviously, we're evolving. And I see more Latinos, pick up and go and do those things. But I'm a California girl. I'm here close to my parents. And when my children were born, especially when my daughters were born, there was a lot of needs, a lot of medical needs. And I couldn't see myself away from my family. And I also had a very good network of doctors that I was established with and my daughters were established with. And I guess you could say I was scared of being alone without a network, family network, friends network, doctors. And so I always said, I'm okay where I'm at. My family comes first before my career.
Mm. You had your son, who's the oldest, and then you had your daughters, who are twins.
Yes.
When did you know they had a medical condition?
I was very fortunate to find out while I was still pregnant.
Okay.
So twin pregnancy, surprise. That was the first surprise. And once I started to go to the special doctors, the perinatologist, that's where very early on they started to see anomalies. First it was they only have one kidney, or, they had a pelvic kidney, which meant that their second kidney stayed in the pelvic area and it did not ascend. They said it could be something, it could be nothing.
On both?
They're identical twins.
Wow.
So both. And then the second visit, they told us they both had a congenital heart defect. A slightly different heart condition, but it was present in both. That then led us to, additional doctors, cardiologists. And then from there, we were referred to Stanford, which is a very well-known medical system here in California. And it was while we were at Stanford that they asked us to test for a specific syndrome, which is 22q deletion syndrome. That's what our daughters have. And that's a microdeletion in chromosome 22, but it can affect people in over 180 different ways.
Wow.
So it's a syndrome that goes undiagnosed for many or misdiagnosed because it manifests itself in so many different ways. So for our daughters, we knew while I was still pregnant that there was something not right with their kidneys. And we also knew that they had a congenital heart defect. That's all we knew.
Right.
I'm in the Sacramento area. Stanford is about 2.5, 3 hours away, but my care was then transferred there so that they can be monitored. And I did have to move about a month before to that area to be close by in case they were born early, that they could treat us immediately.
Wow. So all this while you're working?
All this while I was working.
How did you manage?
And son,
And your
you know,
son, who's also little.
I'm very grateful for the corporation that I worked at because they were very flexible with me. Granted, I was a salaried employee, but I think my performance and the job that I'd done throughout my entire career there up to that point led for them to be flexible. Meaning, I worked from home. As soon as I was put on bed rest, they allowed me to work from home. And then I did stop working about a month um, before delivery. It wasn't a choice; I had to.
For
Right?
sure.
It was a twin pregnancy. It was highly emotionally driven. It's like every appointment there was something else, and it was just like I could barely keep my head above water. And this is during the pregnancy, right?
Yeah.
And once they were born, it was one of those things of, ¿y ahora qué? We know two things. Is there other things that are going to be present that we're not aware of? So it was,
Were there risks with delivery?
yes, there could be risks with delivery. So I opted for a C-section because I didn't want to risk it. Now, it was possible to have a normal delivery, but it ended up being that one of my daughters was breached and C-section was what was needed.
Totally. So babies are born, and ¿y ahora qué?
Yeah, babies are born, and it was like a miracle, because we delivered in Stanford. They didn't know immediately how soon after birth they were going to have to take him into the operating room to fix their heart. That was the reason we were there, because the cardiologist was there. And 5 days later, we were coming home with our kids.
Okay.
I'm still in disbelief, right? But they're like, hey, they're doing well. We want them to get just a little bit older, a little bit stronger before they go through such a big surgery. So we did that. We came home. Still, you're in survival mode. You have all these things. We had all these things coming, crossing my mind. And the main thing is, are they going to be okay? Right? Are they going to be okay? I had a hard delivery. I didn't even realize, but I had to get 2 blood transfusions. I lost
Oh
a lot of
my
blood.
God.
I didn't know. I just thought that was normal for a C-section. And my mind was so focused on, are my girls okay? I just saw them. They allowed me to give them a kiss. They took him out. They got my husband out of the OR and they said, you have to step out. And I just remember the doctor saying, well, we've got one more trick up our sleeve. If this doesn't work, we're going to have to do an emergency hysterectomy. I still wasn't even, understanding, I guess, at that point what was happening. I didn't realize how bad my own situation was in that moment. And we just carried on. And I feel like there were so many angels, so many people were praying for us at that time that I felt good. I mean, good,
Within reason, yes.
because it was a very hard recovery physically. There was no resting. There was none of that. It was being awake almost 24/7 with just little tiny bits, and a 2-year-old in the house, right? Or he wasn't even 2. But we brought them home, and it was, I I mean, up to this point, they've had thousands of doctor's appointments, therapy appointments. They're 13. They're doing so well. But I attribute all that to all the different things that we've done for them. They were born, and I was not shy of taking them to any doctor that would help us in any way. Oh, you think this therapy is going to work? Okay, let's try it. You think this is going to work? Okay, let's try it. Every single specialist they told us to see, we took them to every single one of them. We shared our stories and hoped that others could get inspired, or just feel that they have a community within their network, their doctors or family. So I've never been shy about them, about how we've done it. And I just hope that it's, in one way or another, it helps other families.
For sure. Did you, when you found out that they were going to have some challenges, did you started getting educated on what these were? Because you only knew so many things, I guess.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so how was that learning process? And also, because I feel like there's a lot of emotions,
Yes.
you know, finding out it's the yaurake, and so like lots of things. And this is before you were a coach. And so how did you kind of like work through with your own mind, heart,
Yeah.
soul to manage this?
Such a beautiful question because my entire life I've suffered from anxiety and just something that was very present in my life. And I remember the first thing we found out was about their kidneys. And of course, anytime you hear something about your child, and now in this case, both of them, um, your emotions start elevating. And my husband's brother in law is a pediatrician, was a pediatrician. He's retired now. And he was the first person that we phoned. And I remember him telling me, you can't control what is happening. It is out of your control. The only thing you can control is your mind. And if you don't control your mind, you're going to inadvertently harm them.
Wow. No pressure.
No pressure. And I said, okay, I'll try, between tears. And he's like, no, you will do it. And he spoke to me so stern. And this is not a man that I would speak to often because they live in Mexico. But that right there made the difference in my pregnancy. So every time we would go to the doctors and they gave us another diagnosis, I would give myself 72 hours to process it. Like, cry it out, ask for prayers, do whatever you have to do. And after the 72 hours, get it together, or you're going to, inadvertently
Yeah,
harm them. That's the best way for me to put it, because stress I could pass down more stress. And I thought they're already going through so much as
totally.
they're trying to even just grow into these beautiful little human beings. That right there was the key. I will tell you that pregnancy, as odd as it may sound, helped me with my anxiety because
Wow.
it was bad. But when you asked the question, how did I educate myself? That was another one of those things where I was very particular. When we saw the geneticists, they said, here are a couple websites, here are a couple places for you to look at.
Mm.
Do not go onto the internet. Do not search Dr. Google because you will find everything up to the worst case scenario. Don't
Ooh.
do that to yourself. So we learned about the diagnosis. I checked one or two websites that they told me. I only read the material and I only went by what the doctors were telling me. After I knew that this syndrome could manifest in over 180 different ways, I couldn't put my mind to that.
Yeah.
So it was very only what the doctors are telling me, with that underlying, I guess, asterisk that anything else can pop up. But I couldn't think on that anything else. I just had to be present in what they were telling us at that moment.
And you couldn't know how the syndrome was going to affect until after they were born.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Oh my gosh. So you
Hmm.
really had to stay neutral and one day at a time.
Absolutely. All I knew, or all we knew, is that there was a congenital heart defect and they would both need open heart surgery to repair it. And we knew that there was some kind of anomalies with their kidneys,
That's
but
it.
we couldn't identify how bad it was until they were born, until they had tests. And interesting enough, while they were developing with two kidneys, once they were born, that second kidney disappeared. The body self absorbed it and it disappeared. So they both have one kidney at this time.
Wow.
Yeah,
The body's like fascinating.
it definitely is.
Yeah. So how was it also for your son? I mean, he was little, But you're dealing with all of this and you're still parenting a child. How did you manage to still give yourself the time to process what was going on and at the same time be a mom?
Yeah. We made a decision, we had to be present for all of them, right? And so when I was with the girls, my husband would try to be with my son.
Mm.
We were both working. So we were both working, and it was that balancing act, right? We had the girls on the same schedule. So it was feeding both girls at the same time while the other one is, feeding our son.
Mm.
Um, it was that fine balance. But, for many, many years, I held a lot of guilt. I held a lot of mom guilt when it came
Mm.
to my just was I fully present with him? Was I did we give him everything he needed? He was so small. And we talk about it. I mean, he's older now. He says, "Mom, I don't remember. I don't remember." But as a mom, you still feel guilty. This was, let's see, about 5 years ago. I've always tried to educate myself on everything. Actually, no, this was during COVID. Um, because my daughters were, or one of my daughters was getting counseling for anxiety.
Okay.
And everything shuts down, right? The world shuts down and all your resources are gone. So I was always doing stuff to educate myself and how can I help them? And I remember reading a book. It's called The Highly Sensitive Child. And my son was like, "Oh, I'm a sensitive child." And I said, "Really? What makes you say that?" And then he just runs off and continues playing. And then at bedtime, I was laying with him and I asked him again, "What does that mean?" Or why? And he just said, "Oh, I'm a sensitive child." But then he followed with a response that said, or a question. And he said, "Why is it that you always notice things of others and not me?"
Oof.
And that hit in the deepest part of the heart. And I can sit here today and probably for the first time share this with you without getting emotional and crying and all this stuff. And I'm actually pretty proud of myself for doing that because I know that my healing is it's just working, right?
Yeah.
Having to let go. And it's like, you know what? It's a different, as a family, we're in a different moment in our lives right now. It's so beautiful. Everybody just expresses the love that they have, but we're healing. We're all healing together. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
life, life could just throw us for loops. And I think when he said that to me as a child, it really amplified the mom guilt that I felt. But now I know that it's part of what he had to go through as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that sounds maybe harsh for some. Maybe when I heard that for the first time, I also thought, like, but it's like, no, we all have different experiences that we need to live in this life. And that may have been one of his.
Yeah.
But together, we're all healing. We're all just here to love each other. That's my biggest thing.
And I love that he was open to telling you, like that even his own sensitiveness, I guess, was,
Yeah.
I don't know, I guess developed to that awareness to be like, this is what I notice. Because so many
Mm-hmm.
times people, like even children, keep it to themselves and internalize it. So it's really powerful that he was like, well, let me tell you how I feel.
Yeah. And he doesn't do that very often. So I think that's why they say los niños dicen la verdad, right?
Claro.
And so he was very honest.
Yeah. He spoke his truth.
He did. And it made a difference. I'm very happy he did that.
Totally. Totally. I work with a lot of parents and I always tell them, you're going to traumatize your children. It's not your fault. It's just the way that life works. People will, like each individual human will create a perception around situations that happen. And, intention doesn't always equal impact. And so can't control how they're going to perceive it. But it's really cool when kids are open to having those conversations, which also I think talks about your own parenting, that you've built enough trust with him that he was able to say that to you.
Yeah. And that's what I was told by coaches, by different people who I shared that with like a heavy heart.
Right.
And they said, no, you gave him that space where he felt safe to do it.
Totally.
And so it has helped in the healing process. But of course, when they say something to you like that, you can't help but to feel it in your heart.
Totally. I mean, we're human. We feel
Right.
all the things. So, Criss, let's take a quick coffee break.
Sabrosura pa' ti que.
So, do you drink coffee?
Well, I mentioned to you I'm having a cup right now.
How exciting.
It is actually mushroom coffee.
Ooh, how exciting. What kind of mushroom coffee? Is there a specific brand?
Doze.
Okay, you like it?
I do. I do. I like the fact that it doesn't give you or give me the jitters or that crash after.
Nice.
I stopped drinking coffee a while ago. And I'm not, and I did it because I was going through a healing journey in my body. And so they said no coffee and a lot of other things, right?
Yeah.
But I slowly picked it back up. I was never a huge coffee drinker. I just love the taste. And then if I needed a boost, well, then yes. But coffee has always given me the jitters. And if I have a full cup, then you're not going to stop me. I'm just going to keep talking and doing all that stuff. So we're taking it low today.
Nice. So I'm also drinking mushroom coffee. Same. I also have anxiety and depression, and it's like a fun ride. And so making sure that every intake that you bring into your body is going to be supportive to everything else. And so I am drinking mushroom coffee. I've been in this kick, listeners know this, of putting I added something else today. So I add powdered milk, como nido in Mexico. So it's not like powdered half and half, what people always think. It's like actual whole milk that's in powder, which is really weird, but it just gives this creamy taste to the coffee. So if I'm going to drink drip coffee, I'm going to add my powdered milk. If I'm going to make myself a pour over, then I'll just have it así. Porque like it's a very different type of pour. How do you drink your coffee?
Well, today I went the unhealthy way and I put the sugared up creamer that was in the refrigerator because it's been quite a week full of different emotions in this in our family with some losses. But this morning I thought, you know what, I'm going to give myself a little extra sweetness.
Why not?
To get into beautiful conversation. So it's very delicious, but it's very sugary.
Well deserved. From time to time, it doesn't hurt.
Yes.
Okay. Well, and the thing that I added, that I said I added something else. I added collagen to my coffee.
Okay. And how was that?
It doesn't have any taste, so it doesn't affect it. It's just this, my mom goes to Mexico and she buys like colágeno a granel, which is like by the pound. And she's like, you need to be adding it to your coffee because, whatever. So I added collagen. I've been adding it for the last few days and it doesn't affect the taste. And allegedly, it's good for you. So we'll see. So that's the new addition to my drinks. So let's get back to the show.
Sabrosura pa' ti que.
Criss, you go through all of this situation with your daughters. They end up having surgery very young. So it wasn't like newborns, but still very young. And you hand them over to the surgeon you had to trust. So going back to what your pediatrician brother-in-law said, manage your mind and the rest is something you can't control. So you had to basically trust the surgeon with both of your kids and like wait it out. How long was the surgery?
For our youngest, she was 2 months. I believe she was in there for about 8 hours.
Oh my gosh.
From the time we handed her over to the time we were able to see her again.
That's a long time.
It's a long time. Now, granted, they did so well. They kept calling us from the operating room, giving us updates. So that was very comforting.
Yeah.
But you're never really prepared to how you will see them post surgery. So, especially when she was 2 months, it was hard. It was a hard moment. But, I'm a very faithful person. And so I've always been deeply rooted in my faith and in God and knowing that He was going to get us through it. That's all I had in that moment. I had to really stay faithful.
For sure. It's all you can do.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
tell me.
our other daughter, her surgery, interesting enough, was exactly a year later.
Oh, wow. So it wasn't at the same time.
No, it was a year later. Her heart repair was not as complicated. And so it was half the amount of time. So when we saw her, my first words were like, oh my gosh, she looks so good. Probably not the response that, a parent would say. But when I don't like to compare, but I did have something to compare to.
Totally.
Yeah. And our other daughter, it was a much more complex heart repair.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I'm like, she looks so good. Yay.
Wow. So they're doing fine. They're thriving.
They're thriving.
Being teenagers.
Absolutely. And I love it. I'm loving this phase because I'm really getting to see all of their personalities. And they're just really shining. They're getting confident in their voice and confident in who they are. I mean, as teenagers, that's always complicated as it is. But it's nice to just see how they're evolving as unique individuals in this household.
Totally. How fun. So when do you decide I'm leaving corporate?
Ooh, that decision was made 4 months ago. So very recent.
Wow.
Very recent. I guess you could say it's something that had been in my heart for a while. I never got the courage to do it until recently, where it's like, you know what? It's going to work because I believe that it's going to work, because I have the faith that it's going to work, because I have a plan to make it work. And I know that plans don't always work out exactly how we envision them, but it's meant to happen. I just have to take that step, have that leap of faith. And I had all the support from my husband, and it's been a very interesting journey and dynamic in this whole thing, but we're here.
You did it.
I did it, and I'm happy.
Totally. That's what matters. Do you think it was circumstantial that you were thinking about it, but you had to deal with a lot of the transitions with your daughter, like all of that, kind of like putting focus on what's important, and like leaving corporate kind of like, well, that's not such a priority right now. Do you think that's what happened too?
That was a part of it. And it was a combination of things, right? There's that desire to leave corporate many years ago, but then what do I fall back to, right? I just said to you, I spent 19 years with the same corporation in human resources. So when you start to think of what else am I going to do? Se nos cierra el mundo, como dicen, right? Like you just don't know because you've been one identity for so long.
Totally.
And for me, it took to get to the point where I no longer recognize myself, right? I lost my identity in motherhood. I've been pouring all my love, all my time, everything into my family to make sure that they were thriving, to make sure that they were, growing up as, beautiful individuals, that I lost myself in motherhood. Wow. And that's when you could say I hit bottom, because my health went down. And in my health, I mean, I began to develop an autoimmune disease where I was breaking out in hives, and absolutely no doctor could tell me what was wrong with me.
So it was emotional.
Yes. it finally led me to where I'm like, I need to figure this out. You're not going to tell me that I'm never going to know what's wrong with me. So I went down the holistic path. And that's where I was ultimately told, you've been living in survival mode for the last decade, and this is your body getting your attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a combination of everything where I almost had to put everything on hold and turn all that advocacy that I had for my family and turn it on to me.
Wow.
That's what led me to coaching. That's what led, I was healing myself, and it was so beautiful. Like, you just want to help the world. Once you see how when I saw the transformation within me, I said, I want other people to experience this. So that led me to become a coach. And it led me to have the ability to heal myself. Because I said, well, if you're telling me I caused this problem and it's now manifesting itself in something bigger as a health condition,
Mm-hmm.
I also have the power to heal myself.
Yes.
And that was my focus. And I'm so happy to say, I was able to correct that, and now get to know my body better. That's where the whole nutritional part came in, when I stopped drinking
Yes.
coffee and all these other things. So it changed my lifestyle. It was very hard for a few months there, but it led me to a better place.
Mm.
So all those things were going on. And going back to your question, I had a little digression there, but going
That was
back
good.
to
It
your
was good.
question into kind of what was holding me back, the dynamic in my household was I was the one working full time. I had the stable income, and my husband was working part time. He was an hourly employee, and he took the role in part time. And he was the one taking care of the kids. He was taking them to the appointments and with my father as well.
Mm.
It's different, right? In our culture, you don't see very many men. You do
Yeah.
more these days, but you don't see men taking, care of the family. We had a reversed roles. Uh, my father ended up fully retiring to help us with our family.
I love that.
You don't see that very often. And so it felt like there was a lot of pressure that I was giving myself, right? Where I've been the breadwinner for the last 15 years. How am I just going to do this transition?
Yeah.
Leaving that safety net. Because at the time that I left corporate, my husband was still in his part time job. So we're talking about replacing a 6-figure income with a part time job, right?
Wow.
And, you know, my husband is so amazing. He's like, you're the one that's always worried about the money.
It'll come.
It'll come.
Yes.
And the beautiful part is when you start working on yourself, when you start healing, it just has a ripple effect in your family.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been able to see it firsthand with my husband and the ripple effect it's had on him, the ripple effect it's had on our marriage. I could say that our marriage is stronger today than it ever was. Not that it was ever weak, but you just heard what we've been dealing with since
Yeah.
we got married. So it's beautiful. And to see him also go through his own healing journey makes it that much better. And so I transition out of corporate, and he's like, it's going to work. We're going to make it work. And within a month later, he left his job and went to a different job, right?
Okay.
He'd been there for 25 years. I'd
Wow.
been there for 19. And I'm like, and it's been working beautifully. It's a matter of trusting and believing. And I know you've said this before, and I'll say it as well. Do not leave your job without a plan.
Yes.
you know?
I was going to ask, how was it exit?
um, oh my goodness. I haven't looked back a single day.
So how long did it take to transition? So you make the decision, you have a conversation with your husband. He's like, look, it's going to work out. Then how long does it take from you deciding until you quit?
This is another one of those beautiful things. Because I've been working with coaches. I always say, once a coach,
Yeah.
once a coach, always a coach. And I know I'm always going to be working with a coach, in whatever stage I am in my life.
Yep. Agreed.
At that time, I had a coach and she said to me, Criss, you don't leave the corporate job because you don't fully believe in what you have. If you believe, you would quit. And she just very matter of fact, said it. But that hit me, that I'm not trusting in my abilities. I'm not trusting in my capacity to do this. I am, instead of focusing on my faith and my belief and trusting that this is going to work out, I was leaning on fear.
Yeah.
Que si, que voy a hacer? All those what ifs. But if instead of putting all my energy on the fear side of things, what if I just poured all my energy in confidently knowing that this is going to work out? I'm not walking away without a plan. It's more of trusting that your plan is going to beautifully unfold, right?
Yes.
That was at the end of January. Within a week, I had a date. And the only thing that held me back is that my husband was out on a medical leave because he had a surgery.
Okay.
So we were waiting for him to transition back to work to make sure that, the benefits were transitioned, because obviously we need to make sure that we have medical care with all the needs that we have at home.
Totally.
That was it. He transitioned back into work. Everything worked out, and I was gone 2 months later.
Wow. And so you talked about your identity and how you had kind of like buried yourself in this mom identity. And so then you had to take care of Criss, the human being, the woman.
Mm-hmm.
How was leaving your corporate identity?
Ooh, that is such a good question, because it's something that I've been working on. I left corporate and I'm like, yes, I'm out of corporate. And, I get to now fully work on my passion and be with my family. But there was a corporate mentality that unconsciously I was still living.
Mm-hmm.
And I had one of my mentors tell me in one of our conversations, she says, Criss, you put conditions to your happiness. And I was like, what do you mean? She says, you have the corporate mentality that you need to have X number of things done, or you have to work a certain number of hours before you can let go and then go and enjoy your day.
Yes.
You need to let go of that. And that was a big aha moment for me, because I was finding myself in that. She said, Criss, you've been conditioned to waste your time essentially, because I've always been a high performer and I was always able to get my work done faster than others. And I was an unconscious competent, you can say, because when people would ask me, how do you do it? I'm like, I just do.
Yeah.
So I was always getting involved in different things.
And adding more things to your plate?
It was almost to fill my day. Now, this wasn't daily, right? Because obviously workflow fluctuates. But I found myself having to unlearn those things, having to just really focus on the fact that I am here in this world and I'm in a different stage of my life where it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be long days. I left corporate to have more control of my time, but it was having to release that corporate mentality
Mm-hmm.
that I had to work 8 hours a day, even if I'm home.
Yeah.
So it's like, what am I really doing in those 8 hours? And so there has been a lot of unlearning, believe it or not. And it's good. It's been good. It's a process, right? I mean,
Totally.
I think now in this entrepreneur identity, working from home, building the life that I desire, the business, being with my family, it all takes time. It's a transition, but
Totally.
it's been beautiful.
How fun. That's exciting. So tell us all the places and spaces where we can find you.
Yes, well, I'm on all social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I would say those are the primary ones under Criss Madrigal, Criss Madrigal. And that's the main places where you can find me at. My website, crissmadrigal.com.
And who do you help?
I help women find their voices and help them believe in themselves. And I also help women believe in the power of their voice and become best-selling authors while sharing their stories in books.
How fun. So when is your book coming out? It's coming out soon.
Yes, it comes out September 13th, and it is called Latinas Rising, Breaking Generational Chains and Becoming Change Makers. And it's a beautiful collection of other women that are in this book, sharing their voice, sharing their stories. And I'm excited for this opportunity because this is a book that came to me. It was, just a desire that I had to do this for other women. And I know that those that are in it were attracted to it because it's something that they were, looking for or desiring. And so this opportunity presented itself. There's beautiful women in this book. I can't wait to share their stories. And I just love how things unfold, right? I became an international best-selling author last November. I wanted other women in this particular book. I wanted Latinas to feel that and experience that, and that's where this book came about. And through this process, it also gave me the desire to not just help Latinas, but help other women across the globe. So my mission is to elevate the voices of 1 million Latinas and just women across the globe by 2029 by amplifying their voices. And that's where I started a publishing company as well to be able to do that.
How exciting. That's awesome. And all of that we can find under crissmadrigal.com.
Yes.
Perfect. Last few questions. Do you have a quote or mantra that you live by? Or a dicho?
Yeah. My quote that I love is by Steve Jobs. And you can never connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back and know that they will somehow connect. And I feel like that has been my life.
I love that. And do you have a remedio that you want to share with us?
This is not going to be your typical remedio, remedio casero, but it's something that my family lives by. And in a way, it's a remedy of the heart, and it's forgiveness.
I love that. And the last question that I have been asking is, how are you taking a restorative pause today?
Today, this is how I'm filling my cup. Spending this beautiful time with you, sharing my story with your audience. And after this, I'm just going to relax. I'm going to finish my cafecito and take everything that life is giving me in this moment.
Yay. It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that and spending the time with us. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story and doing what you do. Keep doing it. It's awesome. Listeners, find Criss everywhere in all the places and spaces. We'll have the links in the show notes. Pues gracias por compartir.
Gracias.
Sabrosura pa' ti que.
All right, listeners, that was my conversation with Criss. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do screenshot and tag us at Café con Pan Podcast and the socials. Let me know what resonated with you. What are you taking with you from this episode? Please do share it with anyone you may think will connect with the story and get inspired and take an action. Let's stay connected at Café con Pan Podcast, como te dije, en todos lados. Café con Pam on YouTube, cafeconpam.com on our website. And that's where you can not only find the episode notes for this episode, but also you can discover so many other stories. We have almost 400 stories. And I would argue that we are at the 400 mark because we have pour over stories, we have YouTube exclusive stories, and we have the podcast. So we have shared 400 stories, and it's really incredible. And we wouldn't be here if you didn't listen. So thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Y bueno, listeners, pues así, como siempre. Stay shiny.
Sabrosura pa' ti que